in the United States, which is on one side of the coin you have your team and your employees, and there's what they want. There's what people want in their lives, and then there's what the company wants over here in left field. So the notion in the United States for generations has been, if I grind, work hard, commit myself to the vision of the organization, I'll help advance this company. But meantime, I'm going to enter into a long, painful death march, basically living a life that creates premature illness and premature death. And so we've seen this for years and years and years. People make a commitment, they work like dogs their entire life, only to retire with a truckload of diseases that basically diminish the quality of life. So this has been sort of the standard operating procedure in the United States for decades. And so my message today is, number one, what the team wants, what you want, what the employee wants is the same thing that the company wants in 2019. So what is that? If you ask people, well, do you want to live a longer life or do you want to live a better life? Everybody says, I want to live a better life. Nobody says, well, I want it to be substantially worse, but very long. Nobody says that. Everyone wants to live better. And so when we say better, what are we talking about? We're talking about a disease-free life, being vibrant, energized, and you have the chance to do what you want to do with your life versus what you're limited to because you've got 65,000 diseases that cost you $1 million a year to insure. And so that's what people want. But at the same time, that's what's best for the company. If you look at the Millikan Institute, this is an independent think tank out of California. They estimate that businesses in America spent $1.2 trillion on lost productivity in 2018. Basically, sick days and everything associated with that. So we have a culture today that is becoming less and less healthy. We have a society where medicine is needed earlier in the life cycle. Do you realize that about 10 years ago, 1 in every 3 new cases of diabetes was a teenager in the United States? That trend has not changed. We have more than 30,000 new diabetics every single month in the United States. Can you imagine saying to your son, happy birthday, you're 13. Let's go to the drugstore to get the drugs you'll be on for the rest of your life. Not to mention the comorbidities that go along with diabetes. And so we want to live well. We want to be independent. We want to be able to make decisions for ourselves. And that's what employers want at the same time. I'm a good example. I operate a small company in St. Charles, Illinois, and we do personal training. And one of the best things I can do to successfully operate my business is hire and retain healthy, physically and mentally healthy people. It makes all the difference, whether it's immediate performance and or downstream in terms of costs of healthcare expenses. So we need healthy people in the workforce. And companies want that because the last thing they want is to spend more money on healthcare. And you realize that last year, to cover a family, both out-of-pocket expenses, healthcare costs, and the employer's cost was about $28,000 a year for a family in the United States. And you know what the good news is? The rate of increase is slowing down. Well, it still keeps going up and up and up, but it's not going up quite as much. In a couple of years, that's going to be over $30,000. So my message is that we have to discover how to access a life that allows us to live better. And it is 110% doable. So we're going to walk through these 4 truths of living better one at a time. And the first one is a good one. It's small changes in your health habits produce very meaningful health benefits to you. Great study called, sometimes referred to as the Boston Nurses Study. It's actually the Nurses Health Study. Longest ongoing study of women in the history of the United States. It started in 1976. There's been 3 phases to this study. I want to share some data from phase 1 of this study. 8 years, 80,000 adult men and women. and they looked at beta-carotene consumption. Now, what we know about beta-carotene is that humans don't eat beta-carotene. What's your name, miss?
Lauren.
Lauren doesn't wake up in the morning and say, hey, you know, I have a taste for some beta-carotene. Where can I get that? What we do is we eat foods that have beta-carotene in it, right? So what sorts of foods have beta-carotene? What comes to mind, guys?
Berries.
Vegetables, yeah, a lot of vegetables. Carrots are a great source. Anything else? Broccoli, cantaloupe, peppers, any deep, dark orange, yellow, or green vegetable or fruit. Watermelon, my favorite is cantaloupe. And so what this first 8-year analysis looked at was those adult women, female nurses, who ate more than 15 milligrams a day of beta-carotene, we'll translate that in a second, to those who ate less than 6 milligrams. So the difference, again, in food, not beta-carotene here, was about 3/4 cup of cantaloupe. Now this is one of my favorite fruits. 3/4 cup of cantaloupe. Let's think about this for a second, ladies and gentlemen. How many of you would say, Richard, you've got to be kidding me. 3/4 cup, no human could possibly consume that within a 24-hour period. You're not saying that, are you? This is a delicious, tasty, easy to eat food. 3/4 cup leads to another 3/4 cup and so on. So this is a small amount of food, 3/4 cup of cantaloupe. Over the 8 years of this study, those who were consuming, again, 3/4 cup of cantaloupe or equivalent food with that much beta-carotene saw 22% fewer heart attacks, 40% fewer strokes. Now, this is the #1 disabler in the United States. If you've ever known someone who's had a stroke, unfortunately, often it can be the beginning of the end of life as they know it. So I'm saying to you, 3/4 cup of cantaloupe, where you choose it, broccoli, spinach, peppers, whatever it is, 40% fewer strokes over the course of this 8-year analysis period. Now, there's direct effects and there's indirect effects. We're not going to get into all that here. There's synergy that eating cantaloupe affects other health habits, but what we can say is that humans that were eating those foods with that beta-carotene and all of the other carotenoids in that plant have substantial health benefits. So the take-home message #1 here, we could be here all day talking about studies that show very small changes, huge health benefits to you, is that small changes, not big changes, small changes translate into very, very significant health benefits. We get this wrong all the time in the United States. We feel like, and men are more guilty than women here, men feel like they have to go live in a cave, never talk to their friends, eat dirt, drink purified water, be isolated, and they might live another 43 seconds longer if they do all those things. So again, this just is not the case. Small changes, big health benefits. So that's truth #1 when it comes to living better. The first change. This is important for a couple reasons. The first change is the most important change. Well, if you said, hey, I'm here right now, how do I get a little incremental gain in health, gain in energy, gain in less disease, and so on? How do I feel better? The first change you make is overwhelmingly the most important, and here's why biologically. What we know about healthy people is they tend to not have a lot of things working against them. They tend to not have multiple risk factors, multiple things that are increasing the odds of a heart attack, stroke, cancer, diabetes, etc. So here's a study that looked at this called the Mr. Fit study. This is a study from about 25 years ago, actually. Multiple risk factor intervention trials, what this stands for. In very simple terms, what they looked at was just over 6,000 adult men in the United States, and they wanted to find men who exhibited these 3 risk factors. In America, it's pretty easy. At least it was. It's getting a little more difficult, but it's easy. It was easy to find men that smoke. The good news is that's going down. But this study looked at men who either were smokers, had high blood pressure, or high cholesterol. 3 super common risk factors in the United States over the past 30 years. I want to see if you're a smoker and we add high blood pressure to that, what happens to the risk of death? How likely are you to die because you have high cholesterol and you just developed hypertension or smoking, whatever it was? And so simple math says, well, one risk factor plus the second risk factor doubles the risk, right? That's just straight math. So 1 + 1 = 2. In this analysis, when we added the second risk factor, those who had either smoking or hypertension on top of high cholesterol, there were a 5-fold increase. They're 500% more likely to die over 12 years. So 5-fold increase, adding one single risk factor to your lifestyle. When you add the third risk factor, or you pair these, they were 13 times more likely to die over a 12-year period compared to those who had one risk factor. Now, we need to pause this for a second. So I'm an adult male, I'm 55, let's say I have high cholesterol, I become hypertensive, gargantuan risk factor for stroke, leading cause of death. So I'm 5 times more likely to die over the next 12 years, and then if I said, in this case, I'm going to take up smoking as a hobby, I become 13 times more likely to die over the next 12 years. So the take-home message here is the reverse of what I'm telling you. Do the math in reverse. You might not be a smoker. Fewer people are smoking, and that's good news. Let's say you have high blood pressure and elevated cholesterol. If you just eliminate that first risk factor, one change, let's say you lower your blood pressure. You make one change. And by the way, what did we just say? Cantaloupe, right? 3/4 cup. 40% fewer strokes. 3/4 cup of cantaloupe. If you just eliminate that one risk factor, you've cut your risk of death by over 50% in the next 12 years, making one simple change in your lifestyle. And so this is good news because people they ask me this all the time. They say, well, where do I begin? What can I do? What should I do? There's 55,000 billion to-dos out there today from all of the health experts in the world. Well, do what you want to do. Really, make the change that you want to make. If you want to add blueberries on your Cheerios, then add blueberries. If you feel like taking a walk to reduce your hypertension, take a walk. Whatever it is, make the first change because it reduces the interaction between those multiple risk factors. And by the way, we all know this, right? If you're going to get better, if you're going to live better and you did make one change, who's more likely to add in a second good for you health habit? The person that made the first change or the person still sitting on the sidelines? People don't go from A to Z overnight. Dr. Karen talked about this. It's not a straight line. It's not straight up. It's a process, right? So if you made the first change, you're exponentially more likely to add another good for you health habit to that. In fact, it's easier to do because you made the first one. How do you feel after you make a decision on your behalf that's having you functioning better? You feel better or worse?
Better.
You feel better. You feel more empowered or less empowered? This creates what we call synergy. So the first change for the biology alone, forget about the behaviors, just the biology alone is the most powerful because it eliminates this interaction between other risk factors. So again, we're not very in touch with this in the United States. Now, stronger is better. Why is this? Again, I am 55. I was 55 a minute ago. I'm still 55. And when I was growing up in the 70s with my brothers, we loved lifting weights. We thought it was cool to have big muscles. So we had a gym in the basement and did sports and read the magazines of all the muscle heads. And we had a great time doing this. We would have never dreamed that 40 years later, the field of lifestyle medicine, which is the use of evidence-based exercise and nutrition programs to prevent disease and treat disease, has placed strength training front and center as a necessary health habit. 2008, the Department of Health and Human Services issued the first ever physical activity guidelines for Americans. You guys realize that as a nation, we went 200 years without anyone telling us what to do for exercise, which I guess that's okay. But we've had dietary guidelines for a long time. But it was 2008 that the Department of Health and Human Services said, here's some to-dos. These are the things you should do if you're going to be exercised, to be active. What'd they say? Move your body through space. Of course, we know this. But they said all adults should strength train. Why are they saying this? Well, this thing we call sarcopenia. We start to lose muscle as adults in our fourth decade of life, which is our 30s. Peak bone mass is achieved mid-30s, and then bones start to demineralize, to become weaker, thinner. We become at risk for low bone mass, osteoporosis, hip fractures, spinal fractures, wrist fractures. We also lose muscle. And we did not know, when I was growing up, we had no idea that if you lose muscle, your risk of heart disease goes up, your risk of stroke goes up, your risk of diabetes is higher, your risk of osteoporosis is higher, your risk of osteoarthritis is higher, your risk of dementia is higher. There is about a dozen comorbidities that are exponentially more likely to happen as we lose muscle. This is a recent insight for medicine. It wasn't until the late 1980s that we really embraced this. And now, 30 years later, the government says, hey, by the way, the science is so dang overwhelming, we need to at least inform Kerry that he should lift weights when he's living if he wants to live well. Why are people forced out of their home today? What is the number 1 and 2 reason why adults are forced, if they're fortunate, maybe they moved out before this happens, but why are they forced out of their home? Any idea?
Can't go up and down the stairs.
They are too physically weak to function safely, right? I mean, I can go up and down the stairs. Anyone can trip, of course, but I can go up downstairs. What happens when you're 80 and you've been losing muscle for 40 years? You just can't function safely. Alzheimer's is the number 1 reason why people are institutionalized in the United States. Sarcopenia is number 2. Lack of functional ability. A 110% preventable. It's an age-related disease. We call it disuse atrophy, specific disuse atrophy. If you don't use your brain, it goes away. If you don't use your skeletal muscle, it goes away. You don't stimulate your body, it goes away. So suddenly, we see this every day, right? How do you differentiate someone who's 85 from 65? Visually, the first obvious one is how fast are they walking, right? We can predict when people will die based on walking speed. Unbelievable, but true. The slower you walk, the weaker you are, the less muscle you have, the higher risk for about a dozen chronic degenerative diseases. So what I'm saying to you, and we'll give you a take-home message shortly, but I'm saying that stronger is better as we age, not because you want to win the Mr. Universe contest, not because you want to become a He-Man, but because you can live your life under your terms, not something other than that. So stronger is better as we age. And again, when I was growing up, my father, he's a physical therapist, and he did not want his boys lifting weights. It made sense. He thought we were going to kill ourselves. We had some near-death experiences lifting weights. But today, the most current federal exercise guidelines, those 2008 guidelines they were updated, they were published. The second edition was just published a few months ago. They've included guidelines for kids as young as 6 years of age. Now, they're not saying kids go lift weights, but they need to be directed around activity daily, fun play, etc. And all adults need to strength training. They're not just saying, if you want to look good at the beach, they're saying all adults, because this is a public health mandate. So we want to stay strong as we're aging. And by the way, if you weigh the same today, let's take myself as an example. If I said I weigh the same today at 55 as I did when I was 25, 30 years later, chances are I've lost about 20 pounds of muscle and gained 20 pounds of fat. So it's not just about body weight, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just about body weight. You have to look at body composition. How much muscle are you hanging on to? And if you're losing it and replacing it with fat, that's a metabolic disaster as well. So it's about staying strong as we age to prevent and offset and reverse sarcopenia. It's never too late. Again, in the United States, we like to say, well, hey, I've been doing this my whole life. You gotta be kidding me. It's time to make a change? You have to be kidding. It's way too late in the life cycle to make a change. Well, here's a study that looked at that. If ever there was a group of people who said, it is too late, could it be smokers? They've been smoking since they were teenagers. They're in their mid-50s now. Again, we'll take my age. I'm in my mid-50s. I've been smoking since I was 15. someone says to me, Richard, it's time to rethink your smoking. It's costing you some precious health. And I said, well, come on, doctor, I've been doing this my whole life, so what gives? It's a little late in the cycle to think about changing. You should have told me that when I was 16, not 55. Well, I have a heart attack. That's what this study evaluates. Smokers in their mid-50s, smoking their whole life, they had a heart attack. They had a near-death experience. They had a major heart attack. It looked at the likelihood of those who quit smoking being alive 15 years later versus those who kept smoking being alive. So what we're not going to talk about is quality of life. I know some people have been through this. If you have a heart attack in your mid-50s or anywhere near that, and you've been smoking your whole life, the quality of life is dismal if you continue to smoke after having had a major heart attack. But in this case, some gave up, some kept smoking. But we're not talking about quality of life. I'm just saying, are you going to be alive in a couple years or not if you keep smoking after having had a heart attack? 15 years later, 39% of the individuals who kept smoking were alive. Okay? 15 years later, 39% were still alive. If you just made that decision, you said, you know what, maybe it's not too late to gain some health benefits if I give up this habit. 82% were alive just quitting smoking 15 years later. So what's my message here? You double your chances of simply being alive by just quitting smoking after being a lifelong smoker and a major heart attack. So again, this basically says that unless you have end organ disease, unless you have complete kidneys shut down, cirrhosis of the liver, pancreatic cancer, it's never too late to make a change in your lifestyle. And by the way, as I'm looking around the room here, nobody's on their deathbed. So no one qualifies. No one can say, well, Richard, I'm on my deathbed, I'm going to die in 4 days. So nobody qualifies for that. We're all in that boat where no matter what our age is, we have room to move with a health habit, again, to live better. So it's never too late. And what I want to just put a footnote to this on this whole field of epigenetics. Epigenetics is the study of how we can influence genetic expression. You guys are familiar with the term that, well, it's in my family history. It's in my genes. We have this cancer. My grandma had this cancer, and she had breast cancer, and so on. So it's in my genes, and the chances are high I'm getting. We've sort of heard that conversation, and there's truth there. But what we now know is that we can go above genetics. And this is epigenetics, where I'm not talking about changing the sequence of the DNA. That's encoded. We can't change that. But what we can change is how cells read the DNA. We can change gene behavior. Think about this. Your behavior, what's your name? Debbie. Debbie can change how her genes behave as a function of how she behaves. We never heard this before in the history of the world. When I was growing up, it was always, if it's in family history, it's a done deal. You can't do anything about it. But we now know we can up and down regulate genetic expression. If Debbie's eating apples and taking walks, she can begin to modify genes that affect risk of cancer, genes that affect risk of heart disease. And so now we're saying, hey Debbie, we've known for half a century, we've known that your health habits are the impact player. It was a Surgeon General's report, it was 30 years ago, that said, if you're going to live well, it's 70% of your health habits. Genes are only about 10%. But now we're saying, hey, that 10%, Debbie, you can now start changing that. You eat that apple, skip the ding-dong, maybe you only have it on the weekend, not every day. Take a walk. Well, you can, so this is incredibly powerful. It's called epigenetics, and we're learning a ton about this rapidly. But it really explains why people who have had a family history of certain diseases don't experience it when they're living healthy lifestyles, because they have the immediate effect of the lifestyle and now the cellular modification of how genes are read because of this epigenetics. So it's really mind-blowing, but it's good news, and it really says the older you are, the better. There's no argument. You could be 100. There's no argument against making a small change to live better in your life. There's no such thing as being too old here. Okay, so we've said that, but where do I go from here? So what I'd like to do with the time remaining is just give you 3 simple changes. If you said, okay, Richard, all right, maybe you convinced me. Maybe there's a room for a little improvement in quality of life here, live better for a long time. What should I do? What are the action steps? Let's look at those real quickly. 3 simple changes, one by one. Strength train once a week. Now, I'm not saying this because I own a strength training studio, but strength train once a week. What's the biggest barrier when it comes to staying strong as we age? What would you say? When you tell someone, hey, it's important to keep your muscles going and keep them strong, etc., their response is often what? I don't have time yet. It's a valid response. I don't have time. What I'm recommending here is less than 1% of your week. One workout, and one workout less than 30 minutes once a week, and we can prevent sarcopenia. We can prevent that long, painful death march that starts in our late 30s and just becomes worse and worse. Literally, it's like every decade you get a little lower to the grave. Every decade you get closer and you just lay down and die at some point. So we can prevent that. We can stave off sarcopenia with one full body workout a week. Now the 2 qualifiers here, work your whole body. All right? Don't just work your biceps, guys. Work your whole body. Chest, back, shoulders, arms, legs, simple. You can do it in 6 to 8 simple exercises. And you have to work hard. It was Dr. Bill Evans at Tufts University in the 80s. He did some of the initial research on the fact that the reason why we thought seniors shouldn't and don't benefit from strength training for so long is because we had them lifting soup cans, for heaven's sakes. I mean, this is what we had them do. Okay, Sue, put your glasses up 4 times, 1 rep. Okay, 2. We didn't have them working hard enough. And understandably, you can't have your grandma leg press 600 pounds. But what we discovered is muscle responsiveness never goes away. If you're 99, let's say, Debbie again, right? So let's say Debbie, when she's 99, what we know, how old are you today, Debbie?
Now, don't you know?
I know, right? That's right. Yeah. She's about 40, 39, 40. But anyway, so if we go forward decades and decades, her muscles are just as responsive at 99 as they are today. We didn't know that when I was a kid growing up. We just didn't know it. So adults and senior citizens especially, you need to strength train them because muscles always respond, and you need to strength train them hard enough. So a high level effort, again, safely. There's ways to do it safe, but you have to stimulate the muscles. If you don't do it, you are wasting time. You just can't sit and lift your leg 4 times and lift a soup can. I'm not saying that's counterproductive. It's not building strength. Right. So you have to have sufficient effort, work the whole body, 6 to 8 exercises. It can be super quick, 20 to 25 minutes. Once a week, and we can prevent sarcopenia. Unbelievable. We can prevent sarcopenia. Enjoy 2 vegetables and a fruit every day. Now, I didn't talk a lot about cancer, but the largest systematic review on cancer prevention in the history of modern nutrition was published in 2007. It was a 5-year project by the American Institute for Cancer Research. And what they found, and this was literally 7,000 studies from around the globe, a multinational team of scientists in medicine and nutrition. What they concluded, we look at over 7,000 studies from around the globe. The more vegetables and fruits you consume, the less cancer you have, period. They gave a recommendation of 10 to-dos. That was number 1 on the list. There's other things that make sense too, but if you just eat more vegetables and fruits, you have less cancer. By the way, this is the number 2 killer of Americans in the United States. And so the other thing about eating vegetables and fruits, if you know, we talked about the cantaloupe and the beta-carotene, if we know that eating good for you foods are good, what doesn't get talked about is the fact that they displace foods that are less healthy. If I had to tell you that we want to improve the quality of your diet, the easiest way to do it is not to say, eat fewer ding-dongs. That's tough. That's what we call a not-to-do approach. People don't learn what not to do as easily as they learn what to do. But if I said, look, Ann, just have a banana every morning and get that broccoli going at night, whatever it is, just adding those to your diet provides the nutrients, but it also starts to crowd out the not-to-do behaviors. A study published in the International Journal of Epidemiology that looked at mortality rates, and 59,000 adult men and women found that the best predictor of whether these folks were going to die was the number of healthy foods they were eating. They didn't talk about Twinkies, they didn't talk about Doritos, just the number of healthy foods. So as healthy foods increased in the diet, mortality went down. Those who ate the most, had the most number of healthy foods, were 43% less likely to die. Just adding these foods to your diet. So what I'm saying is that, yeah, the nutrients matter. We can talk about that potassium and the beta carotene, but it pushes the not-to-dos out. It's easier to learn to do this than it is to say, okay, let's have a contest of not eating brownies. Who likes brownies? You know what that would look like? First, I'd have to handcuff you, only to have you break down in tears. Why? Because you'd eat the brownie without your hands. So there is no such thing as a not-to-do program. It's about practicing to-dos that are relevant and productive. So that's what eating vegetables and fruits allows us to do quickly, easily. And lastly, uncover your now. When we look at adherence, this is the challenge that health professionals face. We give advice and then we get a 1% compliance rate. So how do we push that number up? How do we get more people doing what we're encouraging them to do in a world that disagrees, right? If you drive down Randall Road, you can get donuts and ice cream at the same drive-up window 24 hours a day. Dunkin' Donuts never closes. If that isn't enough, you can go across the street to Steak and Shake and get steak burgers 24 hours a day because they never close. If you still are hungry, you can drive down half a block to the Overrice Premium Ice Cream drive-thru for 700 calories a cup without ever getting out of your car. So we live in a world that disagrees with eating reasonably and eating sensibly. I understand that. How do we motivate people? Michelle Seeger, a prolific behavioral scientist at University of Michigan, wrote a book a couple years ago entitled No Sweat. The essence of her book is that as practitioners, we've sort of made the mistake of having people focus on islands when we should have them focus on what's happening today. If I said, hey, what are your goals? What do you want to have happen? Where do you see yourself? Okay, let's work on those goals. I'm not saying don't have goals. It's good, it's productive, it's relevant. But what keeps you going today is what's happening today. She calls it being in the now. So here's an example. I tweaked my knee the other day. I was working. I don't know what I did at work. I bent, I moved the wrong way, so I irritated my meniscus on my right knee. So I went to the physical therapist and he said, Richard, no exercise for the next 2 weeks, let it rest, ice it, etc. So I've been doing that. But a week later, I thought to myself, why am I having a hard time sleeping at night? I usually fall asleep like a baby and sleep through the night. And I thought, oh, for heaven's sakes, that's right. I've had zero physical activity over the last week. So for me, just in my life, it's very individual. What are my nows? The people who can tell you what their nows are substantially more likely to stay with the health habit. If they have no idea, they're not in touch with this, they may as well give it up, right? If there aren't benefits right now. So for me, it's 3 simple things. 1, I sleep like a baby when I'm exercising. And I'm doing physical activity, simple things, even just a brisk 20 minutes walk, 6-7 days a week. I'm doing that. My sleeping is better. I fall asleep quicker. I stay asleep through the night. Number 2, I simply have more energy. Like probably any business owner, you need energy. It's a critical currency. Any of us in this modern world, we have to have energy to live our life. So I'm able to do what I need to do more easily because I'm active. And thirdly, I don't know how you quantify it, I just feel better. I just feel better when I'm active. So if there was a feel-good drug, of course we'd be prescribing that. It already exists. It's moving your body through space. I can't believe how good I feel immediately after the workout. It's just incredible. So both strength training as well as walking, which I do a lot of walking and biking. So uncover your now. Very individual, guys, but you need something that's clear to you. In doing so, you exponentially increase the likelihood that you'll stay with that behavior. So uncover your now. And lastly, I'm going to ask you a question and lead you to just a couple of resources, but as I've been talking here, I see some heads nodding, I see some smiles, I see some interesting looks. We're all in different places, right, in terms of our life and what's happening and what we're doing and career trajectory and so on. If you look at those action steps of strengthen your muscles, add a couple of veggies and a fruit to your diet, get in touch with what's in it for you, what's your now. Who sees room to move on one of those here? Anyone see room to move for yourself? I see the gal in the back, in the dark, head nodding a little bit. What's your name, ma'am?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see an area that you have room to move with a habit?
Absolutely. Moving one.
Strength.
Yes,
Okay. Building muscle a little bit. Getting stronger, right? Anyone else? We'll leave it at one more question. Anyone else see an area where they have some room? Yes.
So I'm like your poster child because I have been making a small change for about a year now.
Yep.
Instead of, and this is gonna sound so silly, but instead of putting the full sugar packet that comes with your coffee, instead of putting a full packet, I just put a sprinkle, about maybe a third of it.
Great.
And that led to a few other changes that cascaded because I'm not as addicted to sugar anymore.
Great.
And so I think about putting that brownie in my mouth before I do, and sometimes I don't need to.
Okay.
So I've cut down on the sweets, and the reward that I've seen over the last year is that I've lost 35 pounds.
Wow. Incredible.
And
Wow.
that is,
Phenomenal.
it's extraordinary for me.
Okay.
So I'm
Very good
almost
news.
at that stage to add, what's that next change?
Okay. Yeah, very good news. Thank you. That's inspiring. So I'm going to leave you just a few resources. I mean, I think what we want to remember in our minds and our hearts when we leave is that what I want is what my employer wants. Employers want people who are physically, mentally healthy, and vibrant. We want three things. I want three things out of my team. I want them fresh. I don't want them coming in beaten down, tired, fatigued. I want them focused when they come into work. I want them able to execute on the things that really matter. You can't do that if you're riddled with disease, if you're inactive, if you've got a diet that's just way off course. So your employer wants what you want. You just have to take that initial step to be well and live well and be able to give yourself that and of course give it back to your employer at the same time. So 2 resources I'm going to suggest. They're on your handout. On our website we call it our Learning Center, medfitnessprogram.com/blog. That's our Learning Center. We put all of our articles there. We put all of our lectures there. Some of my daily blog posts are there. But it's really a resource of information about strength training and the health benefits and the how-tos of strength training. So if you're in that boat of needing to take a step of strength training, that's just how-tos and to-dos on our website under that URL. The other one is my daily vlog. Every day I post a 1-minute video related to strength training. 1 minute on inspiration and education, how-tos, tactics, simple things, but a daily conversation around strength training. And I'm not saying you need to come to MedFitness, but you do need to stay strong. And you could do it anywhere. You could do it at home, you could do it at another local fitness center, whatever it is, but you have to stay strong as you're aging. That's what the vlog focuses on, benefits, inspiration, and education. So I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for listening. It's a pleasure to share this with people like yourselves. If you have questions, I'll be hanging out at this coach's corner, but thank you again for attending. Thanks.
We've got a few minutes, we can head over to the coach's corner. And our sponsor tables are open.
Well, no, I got it.
And your
Yeah.
third session will start at 10 after 11. So it's a good
Yeah.
little break.
Sorry, we got it.
Oh, that was no problem. Thank you, Rich.
I know, Dr. Williams. Yes, indeed. Yeah, very much in a lifestyle medicine.
Yeah, it was my
Okay. Ah, okay. Yeah, that's the key word. Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Yes. Well, that's good news had.
so much.
Nice.
And then
Wow.
Dr. Fox.
that's right, that's what I'm thinking of, okay, yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, well, I know, and I sort of felt like, I'm not quite sure if people will get the message. Yeah. Thanks for being here. I'll see you around, so. Yeah, for sure. All right.
So,
Yeah.
Like we're the only ones here.
Oh.
How are you?
thank you.
Super impressive. Very nice place.
As far as I, I'll put it off inventory in my home. So, even at,
Oh, isn't that the strong one right on the corner? Is it older than you? Is it?
Sure, yeah. Oh, you look great.
Is that the same one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love what you're doing,
Well,
educating, I actually did try that.
Oh, okay.
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 It's just so.
you just have to lead by example. It's the best you can do. It's the best you can do. You'll inspire. Yeah.
So I spent the last, because I.
Oh, yeah.
I started just sitting down.
Yeah, my problem is
Exercise
Yeah.
in there.
No, it's good. It's good. I mean, that's something our work culture is just designed that we're often missing, and it's just super hard.
Well, I'm actually retirement age, and people my age are doing, the average life medications they're on is about 11. I take none.
I know people are stunned when they hear that.
I know. And anybody that has fibromyalgia, well, the doctor says it's, you'll have.
Well, right.
So
So now you're like trying to get back.
Right.
You will.
No, you're right, yeah, you gotta go easy with that, I know, right. Hopefully you can inspire.
You know, it's just,
Yeah.
so
Right.
frustrating
So
for
it's-
me, and there's so many doctors out there.
Yeah, no, right.
I know,
Tried it
that's-
all.
Well, that's just how the system has been created, and, I mean, the good news is there's more integrated physicians.
Right.
There are. Right.
So pick and choose,
Or if there's a whole smorgasbord.
Yeah, I know,
It's like, all right,
it's
pick
a
this
system.
better than it.
Yeah.
Versus eating one garbage.
Over time, physicians can.
Well, but that's what happens.
Lifestyle medicine, they can be a bit more complex, I mean, there's small changes along the way, but yeah, there's still, we're suffering out.
This chair.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Very different. Well, good, thank you. We're just sort of reinforcing what you've already done, so.
Gotta have a little bit.
Yeah, well, I thought this was supposed to be a big productivity.
I never drank.
Oh, productivity, oh, okay.
Maybe they put me in the wrong.
Well, we had a title,
But I was
and you know what? I'm not sure title is right. Productivity, and that's the change.
So this is.
So I think, yeah. We're on the east side of St. Charles, right on the strip mall there. Yeah, so we're right there. And they're for 17 years.
I'm not gonna be great attention.
In St. Charles.
I'm not gonna just. Yeah.
Well, it's good. You get to it right.
And so-and-so is about right. You know what I've also
Great.
like, because I've been a fan,
So much more.
Bring that into your day.
And I've been walking it
I don't, I think in a different way, so I don't finish it, I'm like,
Even
like,
at my age, I can still build muscle.
Without a doubt.
Okay,
It's
great.
never goes away.
you know what I mean, so I've been better at that, so I was
Always
as bad, but still, you know, so, but yeah, I think even just doing a little bit of this.
Now I know.
I'm even better now. I'm better than I was at zero.
Right. But I did wanna ask though, you talk about strength training, and we actually do have like weights in the basement and all that. But is there, do you have like on your blog exercises?
Oh, I have.
You do by yourself, like push-ups are good, right? That's your own body, you don't need equipment and all that. So like, do you have, right, so do you have exercises, because you said to work all your body, do you have just exercises, you know, on your blog that say you don't need weights, you know?
We call it MEDFITNESS.
Oh, I'm
Body weight routine.
Yeah.
It's simple, and you could.
Yeah, I need simple, I need, like you said, 1 time a week, 20 minutes,
minutes, I need to, because I'm doing 0 right now. So if I could do 1 time a week, I feel like it's okay. I won't be like, set balls.
I like not.
There's 2 ways to get to it. So
Is it the YouTube one or the other one?
you can access it both ways.
Oh, okay.
You go to our YouTube
Yes.
and search when you pull up MedFitness.
MedFitness, yeah.
Really sweet.
One is for active equipment, one is body weight.
Okay.
Click on one and it's machines.
Yeah, then do the other. Okay,
That'll give you some home body weight.
Yeah, but that will work the body, the weights. I mean, we have the weights, but, you know, the one thing we don't have is the weight machines. We have the free weights and we have
Those are tools if you don't want to use them. But do some push-ups like we do. They're called scapula squats. You've seen them, yeah.
Or you sit on the wall.
Yeah, so you can do that for varying lengths of time, great lower body.
Yeah, those are brutal, but yeah, they're definitely effective. Right. Yeah. Well, what's nice too, those types of things you can go, even if you're traveling, you're, you know what I mean? Like, there's really no excuse. You know, like, oh, I don't have a gym, or the hotel doesn't have a gym.
Couple
Oh,
minutes.
well, you know,
Good to go.
yeah, but very good information, but it's nice to know that, you know, it's not too late, because I used to, before kids, I was in the best shape, and then the kids came, and it was like, no time, no money, you know, and, so I wish I could go back and never go back to, you know, once, 3 times a week,
Wow.
that's a lot, you know, so if I could just do something small,
Yes.
that's good.
And that, yeah, you can do it, it's worth it, your body will respond. It's always,
Well, it's nice to know that the muscles will remember. I'm like, oh, they don't, you know.
they'll know what you're doing, so they'll know what to do.
Well, and what's also interesting, you know, my mother had a question, my dad's 50, she's now 73 years old. So, but now I turn 50. But they just told me, I'm not a smoker. She quit, she did quit, she did cold turkey, done. And, but I've never smoked, so they said, you're better, you're better. Just keep an eye on it, but you're better than, you know, so it's nice to know, it's not like, once it's in the family, it dictates your whole rest of your life.
I know,
You know,
it's a new insight.
that's something.
Yeah, it's a new insight.
That was really good. You did a great job. Thank you so much. Pat. Nice to meet you. Yeah, no, this was great. Yeah, no. Well, I just came up, I was thinking, so I just came up with tax season. And sitting on the front door, everything was 12, 15 hours. But I did buy myself one of those underneath desks.
Oh, did you?
Metal things. I'm like, it's actually hard. So you think it's like, oh, you're sitting, you're doing, yeah. Listen, when you don't do anything, it actually, I can feel the burn, you know, so I try.
Good.
You know, I try to do that.
Thank you.
So, thank you, take care. Thank you. No, you're good, thanks. All right, see you later. Bye, see you later again. You.
No, because you're like, you always want it. I'm like, I don't.
There's actually,
Yeah.
because you was